On this real estate show, we're going to talk about something that's very serious. What happens when someone dies and they own a home? Or better yet, what if you're a buyer and you look to buy a home where the owner has passed away? It's the real estate show. Welcome to the Real Estate Show. My name is Rick Naples. I wanted to take some time on this show to talk about a subject that's a subject that a lot of us don't like to talk about, and that's the passing of a loved one. You know, as a realtor, you have an opportunity to list all different types of properties in all different types of situations, and one of the situations we run into is listing a home where the owner has passed away. What happens with the house? How is that estate handled? Well, there are a number of different things that can happen, and it all starts with whether or not the owner of the home had a will. Now, in our state, the state of Connecticut, we have laws that guide what happens with a person's assets when they pass away. And I can't emphasize enough how important it is for you to have a will. I mean, what's a will? It's a written document which expresses your will or your preferences or your wants as to how the assets you owned will be distributed upon your death. Now, wills cover everything, as we know. It can cover the house, it can cover your 401k, your stocks, your bonds, or any other assets that you own. But it's important to have it written down, and very important to make sure that you update it as life changes and as you get older. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I was recently in a situation where I had the opportunity to list a home where the owner of the home had passed away. And it was a situation where over the years, he had done a will a number of years ago, but never bothered to have that will updated. And after a certain period of time, everything he had put in his will became invalid because things had changed. When he passed away, there was no clear-cut decision as to what was going to happen with the disposition of the property. So, of course, it had to go to the court system or the probate system. When you don't have a will, you're leaving it up to the courts to decide how your assets are going to be distributed. So if you have somebody in mind, a beneficiary, someone that you're leaving behind, whether it might be your children, your grandchildren, maybe a charity or something like that, in order to ensure that your assets are divided the way you want them, you need to make sure you have a will. Now, this is a hard subject to talk about. A lot of people and a lot of families don't like to talk about the future, but it's a fact of life. With life, sooner or later, there will come death. And although it's a tough subject to talk about, when you amass different assets as you're going along, you need to make sure that you have decided what's going to happen with those assets when you move on. Because as I said, if you don't, it's going to go to the courts, and the courts are going to decide, and your wishes may not end up coming out the way you want them to come out. Let's take a quick look at this presentation, and I'll be back to talk about more of what happens when you pass away and you own a home and you haven't done a will. We're talking about a very tough subject here on the Real Estate Show, and that is a situation where someone owns a home and they pass away, and in this particular case, they did not have a will in place. Well, obviously the court takes over and someone in the family is appointed as an executor of the estate to help all the disposition of the assets with the court's guidelines, and you hope that that individual has had a good enough relationship with the person that passed away to kind of understand maybe what their wants were. But again, without that written will, it's very hard to tell if that truly was what the person's wishes were. Now, I want to talk about what happens when you're a buyer and you find a home and that home is up for sale because the owner of the home has passed away and there's no relative that the house was passed on to, and the home has just come up for sale and you wish to buy it. Well, what are the procedures in doing something like that? Well, as I said, the court is going to handle most everything as far as the disposition of the assets, and of course one of the assets is going to be the house itself. So there's no one to directly negotiate with when it comes to purchasing a home where the owner has since moved on. Usually in the case of when you're purchasing a home, obviously you'll make an offer. The offer is accepted by the seller of the home. A home inspection is done. You negotiate any items that you'd like to have fixed before you close, and you move on. But when there's no one there to negotiate with, it gets a little bit more difficult as far as the offer of the home and the transaction and going through the process, because now you see your offer has to be made and it has to be submitted to the court. Now the court, of course, is going to look at any offers that come in from buyers, and they need to see that there's going to be monies there to not only complete the sale, but also add to the assets to help disperse and pay off any debts or any obligations that have been left behind by the deceased. There's a lot of times a situation where a house may get sold where someone's passed away and there's nothing left because the estate basically ends up upside down. There was more debt than what they can get as far as the home is worth is concerned. My advice, if you're a buyer and you're looking to buy a home and it happens to be a home that's on the market because the owner has since passed on, is to have patience. It's not going to be as quick as a transaction as a normal, straightforward transaction may be. It may take a little bit longer for an answer to come back as to whether or not your offer is accepted. And you have to keep in mind that if your offer is accepted, most likely you're making what's called an as-is purchase. There's nobody to negotiate with to have things fixed or updated or changed or corrected should your home inspection determine there are some items that need to be attended to. That person has moved on. So basically you're looking at purchasing the house just the way that it is. Now that's not to say that things can be done. There are situations where you might be purchasing a home where a will was in place and someone in the home has inherited the house. They, of course, become the new owner, and now you have an individual that you can negotiate with. This is a very serious subject, and it could get very depressing. So let's take a moment to just sit back and look at some things that are just a little bit more positive. And what I mean by that is, let's look at some homes that are currently for sale. I recently pulled a couple of articles when I was researching information about probate courts dying without leaving a will behind or with a will in place. And some of the statistics that came out, I was very surprised to read. And one of the statistics was Forbes magazine recently did a survey, and they found that 58% of us do not have a will. That's astounding to me. You know, you think that you need to have a will in place when you have a lot of assets. You own a home, you have lots of money in the bank, you own a business, you know, cars, 401k plans, stocks, bonds, whatever. So you think that you need to have a will because you have all those assets. But a will is just as important when you don't have a lot of assets. I mean, I've talked to people before about whether they have a will or not, and I've gotten all kinds of strange answers over time. I've had people say to me, I don't own much, I really don't care, let the state take it all. I don't care if they junk all my stuff. I don't care, you know, it's not for me. It's going to happen many years down the road. It's something I don't need to think about, etc., etc. But you know something, folks? There's an old saying that life is short anything can change at any time. So you want to make sure that you have somewhere, hopefully a will, hopefully a document that's on file with an attorney, of what your wishes truly are when it comes time for you to move on. As I said, 58%. That's kind of a shocking figure. I once had somebody say to me that unless you have $500,000 or more in assets, it's really not worth the time or the cost to put together a will. Well, I have to disagree with that because, as I said, it doesn't really matter how much you own or how much you have. You need to have your written word left behind so that whoever's going to handle your estate has some idea on what to do with all the things that you own. Now, here's a tip. Today's wills are different than the wills of yesteryear. You need to include some things in your will that you may not have ever thought of. And as I said in this, or showed in a disclosure earlier in the show, talk to an estate planner, talk to an attorney. They're the ones that are versed as what you should have in your will, what's important. A recommendation was made to me that one of the things you should add to your will as a point of information is your passwords. In other words, how do you get into your bank accounts? What's your password for your email? What's your password on your phone, on your computer? You know, you don't think of that. But once you pass away, people are going to need to get into those things, not just for the point of notifying others that you're no longer with us, but they're going to need to get into your bank accounts in order to distribute those funds. They're going to need to contact all your debtors. They're going to need a number of different things. So take the time to sit down and write your passwords and your access codes, your IDs, your account numbers, who your banks are with, and make sure that you update that list and you add it as a supplement to your will. So whoever is going to be in charge of taking care of your estate has all the information that they need. I can't tell you folks how many times I've talked to people in this situation and they're unaware that the person who passed away had a life insurance policy, or that the person had deposits with a certain bank that they were unfamiliar with, or that the individual belonged to a certain group or a club. So these things become all important for you to write down. And again, as I said earlier in the show, you need to revisit this from time to time and change it and keep it up to date. Now, I'm not talking about you need to keep it up to date every week, but you should at least every couple of years or maybe annually take a look at things and make sure it's up to date. One of my very good friends used to have what he called the box. The box was basically a shoebox. And in this shoebox is where he kept all of his information. His life insurance policy, his banking statements, his bills, his credit card statements. And he would write on those access to those accounts as far as online access was concerned. And he kept that in a secret place. I always said you should put it in a safety deposit box, but he kept it where he thought it was hidden at home. But the reason for the box was, should the time come that he ever moved on, you were able to go into the box and find all the information you needed as far as being able to take care of everything once that individual moved on. I've mentioned the idea of a shoebox before on the real estate show. I've talked to you as buyers, I've talked to sellers about having somewhere, whether it's on your computer, not necessarily on your phone, stored in the cloud or paper, having access to everything that you need in order to conduct your life. In other words, your bank statements, your credit card statements, your utility bills, things along those sorts, and keeping that updated. It not only helps when you're applying for a mortgage or you're applying for a loan, it helps to look at it to see where you are as far as your debt is concerned. And it also is the great resource for someone to go to should you pass away. Let's take a look at this, and I'll be back with some more commentary on a situation we all don't really like to talk about. This is the portion of the real estate show I call the real estate mailbag. As you know, it's my opportunity to address questions that are sent to us here at the real estate show, or just address questions that are asked to me when I'm out and about. And since we're talking about wills and we're talking about people passing on, one of the questions that came up was, what's the best way of liquidating everything that's in the house? What do you do with the furniture? What do you do with years and years of tools and things like lawnmowers and snow throwers and maybe a car and things along those sides? There's a number of different things that you can do. And again, it depends on whether or not the person who has passed had a will or did not have a will. But let's say, for instance, you are a surviving child of a parent that has passed away and there's no spouse that's involved, and you have the chore of liquidating everything that's in the home. Years and years and years of accumulation. Well, some people choose to try and turn what's there into a little bit of cash to distribute amongst the surviving members. They can do garage sales, they can do tag sales, they can donate things to charities. There's a lot of charities online, folks, that you can go to that will actually come out and pick up furniture you wish to donate. You can do an estate sale where you can hire an estate firm to come in, itemize everything up, and hold a liquidation to sell everything off. So there's a number of things you need to do. My advice is, in any case, get help. Don't try to do it all on your own. It's a very sad thing when you're looking to close out everything that's been left behind, especially if it was a loved one. So seek some help, look at the different options that you have, and if you find yourself in this situation, I wish you well. My name is Rick Naples, and this has been the Real Estate Show. I thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.